And welcome to I Protest. This is Donald Jeffries coming to you from just outside the swamp-infested Washington, D.C., as we do every Friday at this time. A very special guest today. I've been looking into 9/11 for quite a while, and this is a new name to me. Apparently, he's been out for about 5 years now, talking about his experiences that day, which are very interesting. Adam Eisenberg was an infantryman who was happened to be there. He was part of the first response team at the Pentagon on September 11th, 2001, and he saw some very interesting things. And that's going to be the gist of our interview. Adam, thanks for so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me on, Don. I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody that's out there tuning in and watching this. Thank you so much.
No, it's a fascinating story because I'm going to guess that unlike me, and I told you a little before that I've been down these rabbit holes a long time. So I've never not been awake or whatever. I've been a radical my entire life since I was a teenager. So I didn't have an epiphany. Just I've never trusted authority this way. Yeah. But most of the people in your position, something triggers it, and I'm guessing that maybe you're in the military, so you're probably a patriotic guy, and maybe looked at things a certain way. I'm guessing that this changed you. Whatever you saw that day, maybe that's what turned you into somebody who would be on my show. So anyway, give us an idea of what life was like for you before 9/11, and then what happened that day.
Sure. So I came from a very patriotic family, several generations of military service, going all the way back to several different points in our country's history. And I did a year of college, and I just was at a place where college was okay. It wasn't great, but it wasn't really working for me at the time. And so I followed kind of in my family's footsteps. And I joined the military. Originally, I went in to be a ranger. And before September 11th, the military and the way we were, I guess you could say, engaged globally looked a lot different. And so the Ranger Battalion at the time, the 75th Ranger Regiment, didn't really need infantrymen. And so I got all the way there. And there really wasn't any way, shape, or form that they were taking new infantrymen on. So they kind of told people once we got to that point, well, you're going to go worldwide now. We're going to send you to wherever the Army needs you. And anybody that's been in that kind of position knows some of the armpits of the world that have Army military bases. And so a friend of mine happened to stumble upon this extremely elite unit in Washington, D.C. called the 3rd U.S. Infantry, the Old Guard. And they were recruiting always out of Fort Benning. But when I originally saw them at the Reception Battalion recruiting, I wasn't really interested. And so that kind of is how I got into the Old Guard. They sold me quickly. They talked about the training there. They talked about all the different types of high-profile missions we could do in the Washington, D.C. area. And then they talked about the female to male ratio. And as a 19-year-old, Don, I was pretty happy with that. So I said, sure, let's go to D.C. And so I went there in August of 2001. And not long after that, our Pentagon was attacked, and everything changed.
Yeah, so basically, this is. I'm guessing you probably had a hard time believing what you were seeing, and I just so describe what happened that day. You were part of the first response team, and I guess go into detail about what you saw. And I know you're working on your own book, so I don't want you to necessarily give any spoilers. I want your book to sell well, but just whatever you can tell us, and because we'd love to hear what you saw that day. I mean, we know already there were lots of anomalies that day. The first and foremost being that all the security cameras there at the Pentagon, with all of them there, none of them captured whatever hit. Amazingly enough, they confiscated the Citgo gas station's camera, as well as the I think the DoubleTree Motel that was across there too. But so we don't know. But you obviously have an idea of what hit or didn't hit the Pentagon. So tell us what happened when you went there, and were you alone in being skeptical about, or was everybody there in your unit saying, what the hell's going on?
Oh, yeah. So I can offer you quite a bit there. So when the Pentagon was hit and struck, we were actually not there. I was at Fort Myer, Virginia, which is not far from the Pentagon. We were at the time getting ready for what was known as Spirit of America. It was a yearly kind of military public outreach event where we traveled around the country. We went to a couple of select cities, and we also did a show in Washington, D.C., where we basically just talked about what the military was getting into. And so we were rehearsing for that. And suddenly we kept hearing these first response vehicles right outside of the base go flying by. Then all of a sudden, the Fort Myer Fire Department, which was right across from Conmy Hall, which is where we were rehearsing for our show at Fort Myer, they left. And not long after that, the First Meyer called a formation and said, gentlemen, the United States has been under attack. And at that point in time, we just had to get back to our base. And so we were trying to get into a place where everybody was trying to get out of. So my base was in Fort McNair, DC. So that proved to be extremely challenging. There's a lot of open source information that can be found talking about just how bad the traffic was that day after the event. So eventually, once we did finally make it over there, that's where I started to witness my first, what I would call an anomaly. So I was seeing things that didn't make sense before ever going on site. And what that was is very simple. I was a private that was full of piss and vinegar at the time. I wanted to serve. I was excited. I was new to my unit, and I felt like I had a lot to prove. Well, they wanted volunteers, and I raised my hand quickly. And they said, okay, you guys are going to go out, and you're going to augment and help boost security with the military police. So all you got to do is go upstairs, get checked, change into BDUs, go down, check out your M16, and be out front in 10 minutes. So I ran downstairs and checked out my M16 rifle, and the arms room specialist hands me an empty magazine. And I'm kind of like, excuse me, specialist. And I say, I'll never forget these words. I said, this has no ammunition in it. And he said, you guys have not been authorized the use of live rounds. And so I was scratching my head there for a second, because at this point in time, I was a signed, sealed, delivered infantryman that had been through all of the stages of training that the United States basic training arsenal had to offer at Fort Benning. I'd been through advanced individual training. I had not yet started to really train out in the field with my unit because I was still so new. But at that point, I felt comfortable performing infantry duties. And so the fact that I did not receive that very essential item did not make any sense to me. And when I went out to the front gate, I asked the military police officer, I said, has anybody provided you with any live rounds first and foremost? I have none in this magazine. She said, well, we have our standard, I think it was 3 rounds, but nobody had given them additional ammunition. And so I thought for a second, well, maybe, I'm just a one-off scenario. Maybe I'm just a new guy. They don't want to do this. But I was able to find down the road testimonies from other people through open source information that were also in my company that did other parts of that security detail. And they too did not receive any ammunition when told to perform guard detail. So right then and there, Don, I'll be honest with you, that is the day, September 11th, when everybody was getting extremely patriotic. Deep down, that was the day that I knew I wasn't going to make a career out of the military.
Well, just to clarify, that was you had been through lots of these things before. This was not standard procedure. Did they ever send you anywhere else without any live rounds?
At that point in time, no. I was very new to my unit. And so that was probably the only reason why I didn't, throw an absolute fit that day, and maybe throw my weight around as if I maybe had a little bit of pull in the company. But I was just kind of like, okay, I'm going to go out to the bay, to the front gate. And that was prior to ever going on site. And so that was a head scratcher. And still to this day, I'm trying to understand, was that a company decision? Was that a regimental decision? And what's really more frustrating is that through my own research, I've been able to find instances where people were put out on guard detail at other bases around the DC region where they were given weapons, and they were out there in civilian attire. And so that was weird. Didn't make much sense to me. That went on for pretty much the morning / early afternoon, leading up to around 4:00 that day. That is when my unit, specifically my company, and others from the old guard really started to make their way over to the Pentagon to serve in any capacity that they possibly could.
No, it's so you're saying, so you're already getting suspicious, obviously, when you have this strange situation with your ammunition. And so at that point, describe what happened when you first started getting there, because most of the when most people talk about the Pentagon, obviously the World Trade Center seems to get most attention. But when they talk about the Pentagon, it's, was the hole big enough? What could have hit it? It doesn't look like it could have been a jet airliner. because there's no impact point for the wings, and the wings weren't sheared off. There was very little debris, I think, to put it kindly, outside on the lawn where you think there would have been a lot of stuff out there because where did the plane go? What was left of it? So tell us what you saw. By the time you got there, had things been cleaned up, or could they conceivably have carted a bunch of stuff away, or did you get there soon enough to see what was really happening?
So, to quote one of my really close Alpha Company friends, and this is open source information, so you don't have to take my word for it. He expected to see more. We all expected to see more at that time, because shortly after the incident occurred, I don't know if you were watching everything in real time, but they were really showing the towers. They showed the towers falling. They
Yes,
showed
yes.
planes hitting the towers, and so I legitimately, and I think a lot of other people legitimately thought that a plane hit the building. We were going to a plane crash, but when we got there, it's kind of like, what? Didn't see any wreckage, didn't see any debris, didn't see anything that looked like it had been drug across, the lawn, which is very interesting because at that particular point where the plane allegedly hit the building, that was down low, and so it is impossible for it to have not dragged across the lawn, especially
Yes, yes.
considering the size of the jet engines. So we didn't see anything, and the building had already, that portion of the building had already collapsed. But I've been saying for a long time that no picture does just how small that hole really was any justice. No picture does justice. And so that's how it kind of went when we first got there. I expected a much more chaotic scene. I expected, because firefighting operations were allegedly still happening, I expected a lot more just hustle and bustle and chaos. And to say that my expectations weren't met, I mean, it was not what we expected. And, we're just kind of all looking there. And we immediately got to work. My first sergeant gave an interview, and you can see this on my X account, Orion Project 911. But our company got to work in doing a lot of different things. I was not a part of that. I just wasn't selected in that early day. I just sat there and kind of was less than 100 feet away from the tent. But then the next day, the following day, that's when everybody started to pour in. I couldn't tell you why, who, what, where, when, why, how decisions were made. In those early days, it was just kind of like, you guys go there, you guys go there, you guys do this. We were there to do all forms of heavy and light labor. We were just the infantry force on site that was there to do as much as we possibly could as quickly as possible. And there was no sense of urgency. It was very strange.
And so you got there. What time? How long after whatever hit the Pentagon hit it did you get there? How much long after impact? How much time transpired in between? So I'm trying to figure out, could it have been cleaned up if whatever plane wreckage, fuselage? I don't even know what they claim in terms of if they even found bodies or got them out or anything. How long a period of time are we talking about there?
So the plane allegedly hit the building at 9:37 in the morning. We got there at approximately 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Okay. Okay.
And so the operation changed over the course of time as people started to do things and agencies started to show up, tents started to show up, things started to get more routine, I guess you could say. But in those early days, it was just kind of strange. It didn't make a lot of sense,
And you were part of the first response team, you said, right? So you were the first people sent out?
So we were a part. There was a lot of people that were at the Pentagon. There were self-deploying units, according to a lot of the research I've been able to do. But as far as a coordinated, large, moving effort, we were pretty much the first ones that were there to do that. General Weldon was and I've been able to find this through research, he was the general that gave the Military District of Washington general, a guy by the name of General James Jackson, the orders on the Pentagon lawn. He said, I want you to activate the Military District of Washington immediately. And in doing so, the biggest, and I guess you could say the unit that was the most capable of responding to something like that en masse was our unit. I mean, all in, we probably had somewhere between 600 to 700 people involved in Operation Noble Eagle while we were there. So
what were you told to do when you got there? You don't have live ammunition. You're not sure why. But so what were you told to do? I mean, were there obviously it just seems odd that if it struck at 9:30 in the afternoon, they don't send the first real unit out to, I guess, do whatever you were doing until 4. That seems like a bit of a gap. And I'm wondering what was happening in between. And what did they tell you guys you were there for? I mean, what were you supposed to do?
Heavy and light labor and just do what we're told. And when all was said and done, the old guard you can find through a lot of different areas of research, and I'll name these, the different responsibilities that we had. First and foremost, we aided teams in the removal of remains. There was a process that had to do with that. So usually there was a federal agency team that consisted of 2 to 3 people, and then maybe 1 or 2 old guard guys that were helping with the litter bags. So they would find remains, do whatever it was that they would do, and then we would take those out. We removed every single thing that we possibly could from that building. I mean, everything was removed. It was taken out of there, and it was then taken to the north parking lot where it was sifted through. People in my unit also took part in the sifting operations. I can also find that our unit did guard detail before there was security that was there to kind of come and take care of the perimeter. We were involved in talking to the families I was able to find, but we were really the heavy labor. And I make no bones about it. I'm going to say it right out in the open. I also have a feather in my cap that no first responders really have, which also is, I would say, important to what I did on September 11th. I was also down the road an aeronautical parts specialist for Pratt & Whitney. So I'm very familiar with aeronautical parts and airline parts. And I didn't have that experience at the time, but I basically overlaid the 2 experiences. And I've been saying for the longest time these things, but that experience really made my beliefs stronger. But going back to what I was saying, I make no bones about it. While I was on site, I never saw anything that looked remotely like an airplane part. And I'm familiar with these parts. I never saw anything that looked like a body that had perished on an airplane. I never saw personal effects, luggage, bags, anything of this nature that would make you, one, believe that an airline had crashed there. All the bodies that we were basically removing were inside the office building. They had perished inside that building. And so, we can get into a lot of the, what it looked like on the inside, but there was one specific room, I guess you could say, when going with the theme of just this doesn't make sense. There was one specific room in the Defense Intelligence Agency, and it was a conference room. And this conference room was off the alleged flight path of Flight 77. And in it, these people were basically still sitting in their chairs in this conference room. They were just kind of sitting there like this. And you could tell that the room had been obviously, there was something, fire of some nature, something had come through there that was extremely hot and burned a lot. The interesting thing is some of the faces, like half the faces would be burnt and the other half would be fine or melted. The other half would be fine. And I had to dig for this, but because these people looked like they were asleep. And so one would think if an airliner hit that building and exploded due to all this fuel, what happens when things explode? They get pushed out. So why in the hell were these people still sitting in this conference room?
Yeah.
Perfectly there, not moving. And I was able to finally find a testimony from a gentleman by the name of Charles Gibbs. And this guy was a career firefighter at Arlington Firefighting. And he was one of the training officers. He was actually I think he was, at the time when he said this in 2006, he was the head of training. But he basically said that we found people that looked like they were asleep. And so what really made that stick out even more is just the guy at the head of the table. He looked a lot like my father. And so that image was burned into my head, and it never went away. And so I said to myself, I never thought it was a plane crash. I was telling people shortly after the event that I didn't think it was a plane crash. And I went back to that specific thing that I saw and all the other things we did not see to basically show the proof of that.
Obviously, so there's all the world's a stage. Said, did you see any plane seats on the ground? Obviously, you didn't. I guess if you didn't see any evidence of a plane.
So one individual, this is an interesting testimony. One individual that I spoke to that was a former company of mine claimed that he thought he saw an airliner plane when we were inside the building. And I asked him, how confident are you that it was an airliner plane? He's like, eh. So he didn't really know. And I said to him, do you have any experience with these types of parts, with aeronautical parts, anything like that? He said no. So no, I didn't see anything like that on the lawn. But just in fairness, to try to be as open and as transparent as I can be, one individual said that they saw what they thought would potentially be an
Because I think that's what people are fascinated by, is that something hit the Pentagon, and it doesn't look like it could have been anywhere near big enough to be an airliner. So it doesn't look like what they said, and so they lie about everything, so that makes sense that they would lie about it. But did you see any, if it was a missile or whatever, or a smaller plane, whatever people speculate, you didn't see any wreckage or any remnants of that when you were in the hole, or the wreckage, or you said
No.
some bodies of people that were working in the Pentagon, but you didn't see any kind of fuselage or anything from a missile or anything like that.
No. And let me say this as well. What do missiles do? I'm not an expert in missiles, but they explode. And look what's happening in Gaza with all these missiles. So buildings come down. And I know the Pentagon is a very reinforced building, but even as an infantryman without missile experience, I can just say that the explosion profile of a missile was different than what we saw. And this is also a good time. I have to say this. There are two sources when it comes to really the technical breakdown of that crime scene that I say must be said right now. Aldo Marquis and Craig Ranke of the Citizen Investigation Team, their work, they were really the pioneers that really got the work started at the Pentagon. They prove without question that there was a flyover that occurred that day, because there's a series of witnesses that they've been able to interview that discuss this. And so, that I would say is a place where anybody's listening to this to start. The incendiaries portion of it, what actually caused, all the death inside that building. Xander Arena, he is no stranger to 9/11 truth. He's been at the game for a while, but he's really starting to publish his work and get it out there. So I would highly recommend people check him out. He also was able to debunk what the government gave us from the camera standpoint, and he's been able to prove that it's a mathematical impossibility. So,
and I want to shout out to Xander Arena and to thank him. He's the one that recommended you to me, so I appreciate that. So, and Brian Taylor in the chat asked about, when we hear all this, I've known people that claim I saw the plane, what do you think people, because these are obviously people that are part of a conspiracy, what were they saying? Was this just kind of a normalcy bias? They went around this, or did they see another plane? Because people have talked about, speculated there was a plane flying around, maybe a diversionary thing or something. What have you talked to any of these people, or have anybody? Because when you came out and started saying what you're saying, and we'll talk about more about what actually you did, I imagine you caught some flack, from people saying, "What the hell are you talking about? You're supposed to be in the military." I mean, it's about that. So did you come up with to talk to people that said, I saw the plane? Are you calling me a liar, or did you run into that kind of stuff?
No, but I'm prepared to. I've run into other things, and we'll get into all of that later. Again, this is a perfect spot for me to say Citizen Investigation Team laid it all out in a silver platter. They even talk about that additional plane sighting, the potential for 2 planes and all these other things. Their video, it's a 1 hour and 20-minute video, national security alert. You can find it at citizeninvestigationteam.com. They go into all of this, and they've also got a ton of other resources on their website. So I would recommend to everybody that's out there to listen and see all that.
Chris Buchan asks in the chat, I put it up on the screen, do you think maybe it was a drone that hit the Pentagon?
So interestingly enough, down the line, and we'll get to this eventually, I don't want to skip too far ahead because there's other anomalies to discuss before we get there. But down the line, when I started to speak out, kind of to the thing you were talking to a second ago, did anybody start to say anything? Other people started to eventually speak out too against what I was saying. And this was one in particular witness to the event who was also serving in a first response capacity. And this gentleman was a drone expert. So the potential for drones, and I say this, I've been investigating some people now for almost 5 years, but they had expertise in drones. They had access to the building. Their timeline doesn't make sense. I've been questioning them and challenging them for almost 5 years now. And we'll get to these people because I originally thought that 9/11 Truth for me was just going to be coming out and saying, hey, extensive time on site. I also have very credible professional aeronautical parts experience. And, I can lift up the other work that people have done and just talk about the anomalies that I can prove. And that's what I thought it was going to be. But in 2021, when these people started to speak out against me, that's when it changed and it became an investigation. So
Go ahead. Yeah, I don't mean to jump ahead. So go ahead with in the chronological order, however you want to proceed. So you see these.
sure.
This isn't adding up to you. And so you obviously waited a while to come public because it wasn't until 2020. So what were you doing during those intervening years? Did you leave the military? Were people saying things to you about, if you're talking private about these things, are they resenting that? Explain what happened, I guess during that time.
Sure. So chronologically, that's the best way to go through it. So we spent 240 hours on site, approximately from September 11th to the 30th. That was my journey. Everybody has a different story because, we couldn't just drop everything and go. When you've got a mass of people coming on site and you've got a whole bunch of other responsibilities within the regiment as well, it takes time to get a bunch of people there. So September 30th, we officially left. We did a flags retirement ceremony on the month after, and I think I might have sent you guys that picture. But we were start getting back to business as usual, and then something very strange happened. Another anomaly that didn't have to do with September 11th, but also has to do with what was happening at the time. So you probably know that a lot of anthrax attacks were occurring.
Yes.
Yeah. And the FBI pinned it on one of their own, and a gentleman, I believe, by the name of Bruce Ivins. And coincidentally, not long after we got back to business as usual, my specific company, Alpha Company, the 3rd U.S. Infantry stationed at Fort McNair, was the victim of an anthrax attack. And what makes that so fascinating is that there is no record still to this day, historically, of that attack. The Department of Defense came in and cordoned off our mailroom, and they held a formation and just said, hey guys, we found traces of anthrax in your mailroom. Somebody tried to send anthrax here. And so they started sending our mail through this process where they were searching it and they were going through it, trying to determine if there was anything in there. And so people were scratching their head. They're like, okay, so first we got hit, by this terrorist attack on September 11th. Now we're getting attacked, on this military installation where we're especially supposed to be safe. And what made it really even more strange, they came in, they did what they did. Our mail kind of changed. It looked like it was getting nuked. It was like melting. They were putting it through some process. And then all of a sudden, everything went back to normal. We weren't offered any explanation. And that was that. So down the road, it took me a long time. And I started to talk to other people. And I said, that really bothered me. And everybody else that was in my unit kind of agreed because we weren't given an explanation. And that was pretty much that. It happened. Then they left. And then here we are. So I've been trying to get answers on that, and nobody can give me any. So, I don't know how much, excuse me, you want to dive into that, but that's very relevant in my opinion. An anthrax attack where there's no historical evidence. Who knows? But fast forward even more. Eventually I got out of the military. I was very happy with my military service. I could have stayed in, and I decided that I just wanted to get my college degree, be a good tax-paying citizen. I didn't agree with the direction that the military was heading in at that time. So I wasn't about to go, get deployed to Iraq or Afghanistan and get myself killed. In 2009, I would say, that's when I started to have some difficulties. I'll never forget when we were being debriefed by the shrinks. They said, hey, look, it's only a matter of time. It's not if, but when till you guys start to experience some type of, I guess you could say, mental issues that ultimately had to do with this event. And when that comes, we encourage you to get, involved somewhere, talk to somebody. And so I started to engage the Veterans Administration because that's exactly what I was trying to do. And so I reached out, and they could not find my medical records. They couldn't find my files. They couldn't find my DD-214. My active duty service record, for the most part, with exception to a few things, is primarily missing. It's gone. And I'm not the only person in my unit that can say this. So a lot of people are like, okay, where are our medical records? What happened to them? And so, getting the, into the VA, doing all these things, that's proven to be extremely difficult. I'm there now, but, where are my missing records? I'm not the only person that can say this. So continuing to go forward, I looked at what was happening as a result of the pandemic, and I didn't agree with anything. And I eventually, not long after it happened, saw the truly malevolent nature of it. And I started to kind of just see that everything was clicking. And I personally subscribe to the belief that the United States, in its most key elemental places, has been overtaken and overrun. We could debate that, of course, but I saw COVID for what it was, and I thought it was terrible. And so I said to myself, the people that are causing this, they also caused September 11th as well. And I said to myself, I'm going to start to speak out. It's been my dream for a long time to pursue this, to try to get answers. I finally thought that the world was awake to the point that the masses would say to themselves, yeah, this absolutely was an inside job. This absolutely happened at the hands of the United States government. They could see all the things that had been happening, leading back to the Kennedy assassination that you spoke about. We were connecting dots. And so, I just said to myself, I'm going to start to speak out, and, I'm going to try and get some answers, and I'm going to just talk about what I didn't see. Well, not long after I did that, that originally started with a video. I put a YouTube video out at the end of 2020, and I started to go and talk, podcasts, opportunities like this. And eventually I did a talk, and in the comments section of that talk, there was one individual's name that kept showing up, and that individual's name is Lee Wheelbarger. And people kept saying, you should really talk to this guy. Lee Wheelbarger was in charge that day. Lee Wheelbarger this, Lee Wheelbarger that. And I'm like, okay, sure. So I tried to reach out to this guy, and I got initially a very positive response. And then when I started to follow up with him, and when I started to dig into him, I started to find something entirely different. And that ultimately is when my life changed. That's where everything changed. And I will walk this statement back so that guy can't sue me. I don't know how I possibly could, but I say, if 9/11 was an inside job, and I most definitely think it was, we would need people that were committing the crime. And for the last 5 years, I have been listening to this man talk about his time on site, and talk about a number of other events in our history that he was a part of. And I started to record him, and I started to question him. And the responses I was getting became crazier and crazier over time. And all I can say, you guys, the bulk of my writing work, which will come out, is ultimately going to be my investigation into this gentleman. So,
and I have not heard of him. Is he connected to 9/11 truth in any kind of way, or what exactly is his? He's just trying to debunk everything you're saying.
So he right now runs a private paid news source. It's a very niche news organization that he runs. It primarily operates on Rumble, but he can be found all over the place. He tries to basically draw people to his private network. And his private network consists of a two-way radio network with encrypted messaging radios that can talk basically in this network of his people all over the world. Classes, he basically provides a 30 to 40 years of military industrial complex, highest possible access behind the veil, joint terrorism task force, intelligence. He has basically served in a lot of different capacities, mostly the intelligence apparatuses in the United States arsenal from, I believe, the CIA. I can't really get straight answers from this guy. I've never been able to. And I've kind of transcended past this place where FOIA requests can get me any type of legitimate answers. But he has worked and bounced in a lot of different areas around the federal apparatus. And most of these have to do with intelligence. And his Rumble is KLW World News. And he's got several Rumble channels, but that's the primary one that he's operating right now. You guys should be able to see it. So
cool. Okay, so you have that guy, and you're deciding to come forward. So at this point, and also let's talk a little bit about April Gallup. I talked to you before. I find her one of the most fascinating. When I think of the Pentagon, I think of her because she was probably the most outspoken witness there that I know of. And she's filed a lawsuit against Dick Cheney and them. I think it was thrown out later, but and she basically said the same thing you did, that she was an employee there and she said there was no plane or whatever. So I think you said you talked to her or you tried to or something.
So I originally, I wanted to reach out to her and I was able to get her contact information, but it came to me by way of somebody that I really did not trust. And so I did not want this person reaching out on my behalf. So I said to myself, I'm going to finish my work and that's when I'm going to engage April. So April did try to go the legal route. I can't really get into all of that, but I would highly recommend you guys can actually look into the legal documents. You can find it all. But it's been a minute since I've looked at those. But they threw out her case. They said it was frivolous, and
Yes.
they basically bounced it. And I've heard one time that the judge that was overseeing that case had some ties to the Bush family. I've never been able to confirm that, but I find that to be fascinating. But we didn't have the information that we have now. And so make no mistake, I will be circling back to her.
So when you decide to come out in public, and so you met, you don't have to mention names, or you can. I don't care what you do or not, because I'm not saying anything that I know is true. This is your story, so I don't know. But I don't. So when you went, we have as I described to you, the JFK assassination research community is large. It's largely a lunatic asylum a lot of the time. So there's lots of difficult personalities, big egos, and they've been doing this since the 60s, since before I came along. They were arguing with each other, always fighting, and that's why nothing ever gets done. 9/11 truthers are very much the same way. They have huge egos. They have competing agendas, and you see this with like Dr. Judy Wood and people like that. Jim Fetzer, my friend, who I like. But I mean, these people, they all are so cocksure. No planes hit the World Trade Center. There were no people there. I mean, and I'm not saying I'm open to anything because you've been lied to, so their story's a lie. But they are so sure about their thing, and they argue with each other, and they think you're this like this guy William Rodriguez is. He saved a lot of people, I think, from the sub basement and lineup. But surprising number of these guys hate him, and they think he's this. I tried to get him on my show, and he's so tired. He's like, I can't do any more interviews. So, explain what happened when you first. I guess maybe it wasn't what you thought. You probably thought you're gonna. Hey, these people are 9/11 truth. Cool. I'm made for this. They want some 9/11 truth. So what happened there when you started talking to these people?
I'm laughing, you guys, because I got to be honest. I actually understand what that man's going through. So when I stumbled upon the gentleman that I stumbled upon, I said to myself, I'm going to go to the 9/11 truth movement. I got to get some help. I got to go to the pros. So I went to Dan Hanley, a man that I trust still. He's a pilot.
Yes.
He ran 9/11.
He was on my show, I think, a couple years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's a swell guy. I think the world of him. And I said, I'm coming to you because I need a pilot. I just need a pilot that can say to the public, hey, I could never have flown that flight profile, that Hani Hanjour, which Hani could not even fly that either. But a professional pilot, I wanted one. And I said, I explained to him, hey, I've stumbled onto some people. These people are bad news, and I need some help. And so he gave me kind of, an introduction to all these people, all these players in the 9/11 Truth movement. And let's just say, I thought, man, it's on now. And all I ran into pretty much after that was nothing but counterintelligence maneuvering. And there's a resource. It's called the 25 Rules of Disinformation. You guys can Google this. It's a quick and dirty kind of write-up about the types of behaviors that I was seeing and witnessing. And so I'll say it very, very clearly out in the open. 9/11 Truth is a counterintelligence game, and it's a very carefully played game. And it doesn't surprise me that what you witnessed in the JFK Truth community was happening, because infighting is a strategy of disinformation professionals. And so I've witnessed it all. And so I came on the scene. I didn't know really about counterintelligence, COINTELPRO. I didn't know about any of these things. And so I went to the first guy that basically was recommended to me was a guy named David Chandler. He's a scientist for 9/11 Truth. He sits on the board of the International Center of 9/11 Justice. That's when I realized with him. And my second writing work is going to show all my interactions with these truth seekers. But when I started to talk and interact with David Chandler, that's when I knew something wasn't up. And as a scientist, that made absolutely no sense. And then it just kept getting weirder and weirder and weirder with more people until finally I stumbled across a guy named Ken Jenkins. He's a really good buddy of David Chandler's. Ken Jenkins, without question, immediately chastised me for looking into my lead suspect, Lee Wheelbarger, and was like, he's a nobody. I'm like, well, how do you know he's a nobody? You're the very first person that knows this man. How is he a nobody? He's like, and yeah. So I've been saying for a long time, first, I'm going to talk about my journey and how I stumbled into the people I can. The first writing work is really about all that and lifting up what currently exists. And then I'm going to turn, my second writing work is I'm literally just going to cut and paste all of my interactions with these people and ask questions along the way. These people that are being flown around the world, they're hailed as experts or anything but that. The majority of 9/11 Truth is bad news. And so I say to people, how do we out these people? How do we illuminate them? And in early 2024, I put a $5,000 challenge out to the world, to anybody, especially to the experts. They're all aware of this. I said, okay, you're going to take the position that Flight 77 hit the building, and I'm going to take the opposite position. Here's $5,000, and it's a debate challenge. And I told him, when you lose the challenge, I'll donate all of your money to stop soldier suicide. And if you don't want to put up money, let's put up all of our social media. We'll put up our websites. We'll put up our social media, whatever. And none of the professionals would take me up on it. So, their methods right now seem to be speak no evil, hear no evil, see no evil. The less they say about me, the better. There's a lot of people that were furious that I was not asked to go to the DC event. But I was like, no, it's cool. I'm just going to let it happen. No big deal. Yeah. I've got enough friends who are there that are going to be able to, introduce me to anybody. But really, I kind of took a knee, and I've been in bunker mode. I've done a couple talks in the last year, but anybody that's been following my journey knows that I'm really trying to get this writing project, this first one, done, because then I'm also going to turn to these fake truth seekers, and I'm going to say, okay, you can't slam me. You can't discredit me in any way, shape, or form anymore. You've been trying to smear me. You can't do that. So here's this. Here's this information. How are you going to respond to it? So I've got a lot of people in a lot of weird positions. And when my work is released, and it's eclipsed 170,000 words, it's 1,600 pages, and it's hundreds of pictures, but it's transcription of this gentleman talking about things. And so, when I make this very clear case and I say, look, this gentleman right here is the cabal. Here's why. I've even attached this gentleman and his proxies to the JFK assassination recovery team, Don. He was involved in Oklahoma City. I've even got him predicting a mass casualty event that happened in the last 12 months. And in the next day.
This is Wheelbarger? Who's this?
Yes, this is Lee Wheelbarger. Okay. He's got family ties to the highest echelons still of government, the Department of Defense. He's got ties to the intelligence apparatus. He's everything. Um, so yeah, illuminating this guy is the most important thing. Pressuring him is the most important thing. And then we're going to turn our cameras on the truth movement, and God only knows what's going to happen then. But these people are desperate. That's all I can say. It's. I don't want to say names there because I don't want to. There could be people that I've just maybe misunderstood, so I don't want to derail their positive efforts. But a lot of the pillars of 9/11 truth, I've gotten some really bad positions.
What do you think is their main point of contention with you? Because most of them, I think, agree with what you saw, that no plane hit the Pentagon. So they should, I would think they would welcome you because you're an eyewitness and you
Yes.
were on site and you're seeing these things directly. You're not seeing anything that resembles an airplane being taken out anywhere, and you're not seeing any bodies that look like they were on an airplane. They were working there. What do they? I mean, do they give you a reason why they're not responsive to your story? What do they think you're saying that they object to?
Well, a friend told me that I wasn't invited to DC because they thought I was going to be difficult. I don't know what that entails, but
Mm,
what I think really truly it is, Don, is just they need to drag everything out slowly to a place where people
mm,
become apathetic. They don't care. Unfortunately, I hate to say it, a lot of people, a lot of the younger crowd, they don't care about 9/11. It's kind of sad to say, but
mm,
their job is to basically be, excuse me, the talking head, the figure. And so it's kind of, I heard the term stand down psyop. The public
mhm,
sees these people and they're like, oh, somebody else is on it. They've got this. It's fine.
mm.
And when in fact, they are the expert, they're doing all these things, but then somebody like myself comes that was there, that has something to offer, a critical piece of the puzzle, what have you. That's when they'll either try and allow them into the, I guess you could say, the little club of people and that they can control. And you see this, it's so funny. They'll let some people in, they'll let some people talk, but then they won't let others. So I don't know. I think it just boils down to they need to drag things out as much as they can. They also need to keep the discussion around actual suspects and people that we can actually point to out of the limelight. So, people like Richard Gage, for example, he's making a movie. I haven't kept up with him. He's made a movie about going to the courtroom. Well, my book is transcription that can actually be used in a courtroom. So that's ultimately my opinion. That's why these people operate the way they do. And again, for anybody listening, I would highly recommend studying the 25 rules of disinformation, because you're going to be able to gain something from that, even if people in everyday life are trying to take advantage of you or to try to get something past you.
Robin Lee, I don't know if you see that in the chat. I'm not sure. Did Adam say our government is also countering the global narrative? I'm not
What,
sure
I'm not
quite.
sure what you,
Yeah, Robin, I'm not sure. I love Robin. She's a friend. Robin, maybe you can be more specific. I'm not sure what you mean by that question. Your government is countering the global narrative. Maybe you can reread it or something. But well, and again, and it's full disclosure. Richard Gage, I've met a couple times. I was at his Turning the Tide conference that I guess you weren't at, and good. I got to meet Dennis Kucinich, a hero of mine, and I met Xander Arena outside. We were both waiting for an Uber, and he was going to speak, I think, the next day. I was only there for that one day, and he's the one who told me about you. So I just, I think everybody should be welcome at these things, but it's what happened to you is not unusual, unfortunately, and I
yeah,
don't know why that is, and I don't, and and what happens is it fosters theories that the people that are truthers or researchers are, they're purposely muddying the waters. They're not allowing truth. They're stopping truth, as a matter of fact. And I don't know why that would be, but apparently there's enough of them in there that do this stuff to halt real research. Because I've been frustrated with JFK for a long time. Years ago, on the biggest forum, the London forum, the education forum, where the JFK people post, and 9/11 people post there too, but JFK is the big thing. I tried to write a consensus statement for the community, just a brief statement that we can all agree to. There was a conspiracy. Lee Harvey Oswald was framed. I forget how, but I wrote it very, I think succinctly. And it was pages and pages of people arguing over this word or that word. they won't come together. And that's the problem. If you have the lone nutters there, they don't argue. Oswald did it. The government's right. They don't attack each other. Same way in 9/11. You're crazy. It was a crazed 19 crazed Arabs and terrorism did it. And that's all that counts. They're not going to quibble over anything like that. It's just the side that's fighting for truth that has all of these quibbles. So I want to make sure. So did you find anyone in Xander Arena, I imagine? Did you find anybody else that you met that was studying this that you found was above board and
One,
oh,
one person, and that's the citizen investigation team. Aldo Marquis and Craig. I haven't met Craig Ranke. I've met Aldo. He's become a dear friend. But just those two guys. There are other people that are out doing things in 9/11 truth. But when it comes to the Pentagon, and I would say really being able to get answers, to get justice, because the Pentagon, in my opinion, is the eye of the storm. What happened at the towers was terrible, absolutely terrible. But focusing on that aspect is not going to get us answers. It just won't. And so I say, my two closest teammates. I could call Xander a teammate. He would say I'm a teammate. I wouldn't necessarily call Aldo a teammate, but he's a resource. He's a friend. He would show up if I needed him. I would show up if he needed him. But just those three guys, really. And there's other people that are out in doing other, I would say, groundbreaking work that I'm getting to know. I don't want to say their names or promote their work just yet because I haven't had the chance to really and truly dig all the way into it. But I also got to say, when outside of the Pentagon, and Xander might be a little bit upset that I say this, but Norman, my buddy Norman, the 9/11 revisionist, I got to throw him a shout out. He's helped me out quite a bit. He primarily focuses on directed energy weapons, and of course, the nanothermite crowd does not like that being brought up. But I don't have to really go in that direction because I wasn't at the towers. I'm not an expert on these things. But regardless of what people believe happened at the towers, since we're talking about 9/11 truth in general, let me say this: the individuals that I have started to investigate and record information on, they've got talks about their time in New York in 2001. They've got talks about directed energy weapons and how they had personal contacts and have taken pictures of their use. They also, one of them was a chemistry expert. And so if nanothermite, if you believe that brought down the towers, and everything else, I mean, these people had chemistry backgrounds as well. And I can point to a lot of other things as well, but that's ultimately what the book is going to be about. I say to people, why argue about how the magician did it when I can take you right to the magician and say, here's the magician, here's the one that did it. We know it wasn't a plane at the Pentagon. We absolutely know it wasn't a plane. And so the second we know that, it doesn't matter what it was. We can get pretty close, and Xander and
right.
Citizen Investigation Team do a damn good job of getting close, but we're never going to know exactly what it was. I just know based on what I saw, I know for a fact that was not a plane.
Well, I want to make sure I ask you to Chris Graves, who's one of my primary research, who does great work. He said to make sure to ask you, did you smell cordite at that day, and did anyone else talking about smelling cordite at the Pentagon?
So people have mentioned smelling cordite. The names are escaping me. Whenever I'm asked that question, I have to say, there's never been a time where I could sit there and say, okay, that's cordite. I know what cordite smells like. So full disclosure, I can't specifically say that I smelled cordite because I just didn't know what the hell cordite smelled like.
Yeah, I wouldn't know it either.
Yeah. And not only that, we were wearing Tyvek suits and we were wearing masks that kept.
Oh, okay.
So we, but even outside of the. Yeah, I mean, we were there at 4. I'll tell you, this might be a little bit too much, but human remains have a very distinct smell, and that is more than anything. And there was also a lot of water being dumped onto that area of the building, so it had a very watery type of smell as well.
Yeah, and Robin Lee has rephrased your question: is the government causing division by countering their own narrative?
I would say I would say absolutely. There's
Yeah, I
probably
think
a
they
lot
always
they're
do.
doing to offer counters and confusion. So
And also, Brian Taylor had a question. Is Adam familiar with Christopher Bolin?
I am. So I
Written, yeah,
reached out to Christopher Berlin. I connected with him back when I started connecting with a lot of 9/11 truthers. He told me that I had one of the most impressive collections of information on the subject. I kind of gave him access to my picture data vault and my other data vault. And then he vanished. I would love to have, tried to get a little dream team together where I go and,
yeah.
this was a long time ago. And I considered him to be a potential person because I think he really covers the geopolitical angle very well. And he vanished.
I
Now,
think he lives overseas somewhere. I think doesn't he live in Denmark or something? Sweden. I
he
think.
he may, and I,
Yeah.
I thought he would have liked to have joined because I heard interviews of him talking about how the feds, rolled in on him and right in front of his family, kind of rolled him up and
Yeah,
beat
he
him.
might be frightened because, and he did. I think he did some of the best work on Flight 93 in
Yeah,
Pennsylvania. He did a lot of great work there. So he's done great work, and he used to write for the American Free Press, which I write for now.
nice.
So yeah, but he's he's not. I don't think he's the easiest person to get a hold of. You're right. Yeah, he should be. There's so many people that have done good work here,
Yeah.
and some of them have kind of faded into the background, and it's. But yeah, I think Robin, I think Adam would agree. Like he says, the CIA, whoever. There's always people countering narratives. It goes back to the CIA's memo to critics of the Warren Report back in 1967, was basically when conspiracy theory was born. To be used to hit people over the head. Call them conspiracy theorists, and they talked about that. And Operation Mockingbird is still there. Tulsi Gabbard, I wrote a story for the American Free Press a couple months ago. I don't know what happened to it, but she was supposedly starting an initiative to root out what was left of Operation Mockingbird. I don't know if that happened or not, but she was supposedly trying to. So they definitely have people working on this. And unfortunately, it looks like in the truther movements and these that they have certain people. What happens is everybody points fingers at each other. Everybody thinks like I'm sure those people may think you're a disinfo agent.
Oh yeah,
I don't know
especially
what
with my
I
last
know.
name. With my last name,
Well,
they think.
I was going to say that does kind of stand out, and he's not going to talk about the dancing Israelis. I
Oh
guess.
yes, I will, because I say to people, I'm not Jewish and I'm not a Zionist. And so it's
Wow.
so funny. Yeah, I have to cover all of that in my book. I've been doing 9/11 Truth long enough to see the comment sections. Everybody's like,
Oh,
not
I mean,
everybody, but
Adam
it's
Eisenberg, the name, yeah, that's
yeah.
gonna
Well, and that's
that's
what I
gonna
say to people.
pigeonhole you.
Well, and I say to people, my dad wasn't Jewish. I can prove it. My grandfather wasn't Jewish. I can prove it. Eventually, down the line, one sect of my family was. That was my dad's dad, but everybody else was not Jewish, and that ended long ago in my
Yeah,
bloodline. And that's just all there. I go to such an extensive length proving that because, as I said, all the world is a stage. I have
yeah.
to. So
And I try to talk because a substantial part of my audience, I have a pretty big audience on Substack. They're obsessed with Jews, and maybe I'm becoming obsessed with Jews too. But then I tell them I don't know what that even means. Most of my relatives are Jewish. I'm not, but one of my mom's sisters married a Jew, 100 years ago or whatever, and he converted to Catholicism like the rest of my family, and they had 11 kids. And a bunch of them had 7 kids. So you could do the math. There's a bunch of half Jews, a bunch of quarter Jews. Now I guess 1/8 Jews because they've had kids too. Those are most of my cousins because that's the biggest side of my family. So I don't. Are they Jews? I don't know. It's a very tiny. So I don't even know what that means anymore. But it's important. We should talk about it, but your name certainly muddies the waters. Anybody that hears that's going to say, "Adam, I seem to be."
yeah, yeah.
He's not going to tell the truth.
Oh, believe you me, I had to do it all. I spit in the cup, the 23 and me. I wanted to do this for my own curiosity. Everybody's like, why did you do that? That was stupid. Now they have your information. I'm like, I don't care. The government
Yeah,
already has my information. But, so I did the DNA testing. I did the ancestry.com. I did it all because
yeah,
I had no choice to. And some people in the 9/11 truth movement at first didn't understand why I was going to such lengths. But then they're like, I get it. So it's like, yeah. I mean, I have to basically be as transparent as I can be. I've got to talk about pretty much my entire childhood, my family, all of it, and show all the documents and just screenshot it and say, guys, I can't stress to you, I am not Jewish. So
Oh,
again,
your story is fascinating. I don't know if you can stay longer with us
yeah,
or not. If you have to go, okay. Well,
of
let's keep
course.
going. See, if we let's get some more questions in the chat, guys. Um, but So I want to know a little bit more about that day when you're there and you're first starting. You're already kind of suspicious about the ammunition, as as you normally you should be. As you're kind of walking along, and you've got a I don't know. You said there's pretty many people there with you. Uh, as you're, I would think the first thought that would occur to anyone is, this doesn't look like an airplane wreckage site. I'm looking around. Okay, where is everything? I mean, was there chatter between you guys? Was anybody else saying, "Hey, where the hell's the plane? Where are the bodies? Where's?" I mean, it doesn't look like anything. It doesn't look like an airplane hit this. Were other people talking about it, or just kind of following orders?
Not really, honestly. And I'll never forget. I mean, even to this day, it was a very emotional day. Just watching what was unfolding to our country. And so nobody was really thinking along those lines. It was, and full disclosure, I mean, there were probably very, very, very few people in that sea of people that had ever actually seen an air crash before. I say, compare you can, and we have technology now, we can look this all up, but compare any other air crash you find. And furthermore, there was an incident in Washington, D.C., Air Florida Flight 90. That was a major crash that actually established the regional response in the D.C., Northern Virginia region. And what do we see in the pictures of that wreckage? We see a big plane fuselage being hoisted out of the waters.
Yes.
So why is it that we can look at all these other plane incidents and then at the Pentagon and magically Shanksville, we don't
Yes.
see wreckage
Thanks,
that
Luther.
day? Yeah, we don't see wreckage. And other people get into the towers in that regard. I try not to touch it because, again, you want to talk about, where the arguments really begin. They happen at the towers too. I mean, but it's really more prevalent in Shanksville and the Pentagon. But yeah, so we didn't see anything. Nobody was really sitting there, kind of thinking to themselves like, wow, like what a plane didn't hit this building. They just thought, my God, that's small. Like that's what happens when a plane hits a building. Okay. Wow.
So afterwards, when a few years down the road, when the 9/11 Commission comes out, that and I don't know if you even bothered to be interested in it, but obviously it was nonsense. I mean, I talked to when I was writing my book Hidden History, there's a guy named Scott Forbes that worked in the World Trade Center, and he moved to England out of fear. He was still scared. That's probably 15 years later when I talked to him, or maybe almost 15 years. But he his he and all his people were not there that day. They were off, so they survived. But he talked about how they had all seen all these strange things happening in terms of power outages, workmen coming in and doing unclear things, and security cameras weren't working. And he tried to alert the authorities afterwards, the Port Authority, the police, the FBI, and then the 9/11 Commission. And he thought they would want to know about this. And nobody wanted to know. They did not want to know anything about it. And the 9/11 Commission report put in there were rumors about these strange things going on, but the commission investigated it and there weren't. And again, they did investigate it because they wouldn't listen to him. And him and his people knew they were firsthand witnesses to it. So
Mm.
that's the kind of lies that were going on. And that guy, you can hear I could hear the fear in his voice still. He moved to England and, what is he scared of? Is he scared of the crazed hijackers? And I wrote in my recent book, American Memory Hall, I talked about one of the hijackers. Oh God, what's the God? I'm blanking out in the guy that's the most known probably, but his father.
Hani Hanjour.
No, not Hani Hanjour. One of the World Trade Center ones. I can't believe I'm the guy whose passport was found magically amidst all the rubble. But his father uh, gave it. He had to go to Germany to give an interview. He talked about his son called him the day after 9/11 and talked about how he's being framed by the Mossad or something, and he was living in hide. And that the story ends there. It's like, wait, how could that not be as American media weren't interested in? How could he? If obviously his son perished in the crash, right? That's what we're told. But that's so these kind of questions are everywhere, and that's why you have people saying there were holograms. direct energy weapons, which, especially in recent years with what happened in Hawaii and everything, that's becoming increasingly popular. Something's going. It looks like somebody's directing some kind of weapons, but these are questions that should be asked. But I don't think we should argue with the, and I don't think anybody should at this point. I don't think anybody should think it's beyond the realm of possibility. We're speculating because we have a government and a media that won't investigate these things. So people like you're a witness, and you're going. These years go by, and you're before you decide to go out. So at what point do you start going more vocal with your family and friends? I'm wondering if you became a black sheep in your family. How did they take it when you started saying, "Hey, this is a lie. It had to be an inside job."
I've always been the black sheep in my family, so I say that jokingly, but but it's true. So when I started to speak out about this, and I wanted to go back to one thing. The 9/11 Commission report doesn't even mention our unit, doesn't even get into the details of my unit.
Right.
And we were the bulk of that effort. 600 to 700 people, and you don't even mention this. And what gets even crazier, beyond the 9/11 Commission report, I have been trying to gather all of the after action reports and every official document that the agencies that participated in the event are responsible to provide. The Arlington after action report that was done was not even done by Arlington Firefighting. It was done by Titan Systems Corporation. This is a former defense contracting agency, defense contractor out of California. And what's interesting about that, he's no longer with us. You might know Daniel Hopsicker. You might know of him.
Oh, yes.
You can find some information where he was starting to dig into that company, but they were extremely corrupt. And when you start to do FOIA requests, this is what I've been engaged in for quite some time now. When you FOIA request the Department of Justice, because the very first page of the Arlington After Action Report says that this came from a grant that came from the Department of Justice, Office of Justice Programs. I went to that agency. I spoke to their FOIA officer. You cannot get a single shred of document on anything that has to do with the grant given. And then when you go to the reference section, you can start FOIA requesting documents that are referenced in the reference section. And I did all that. And a lot of federal agencies and local state agencies in Virginia are getting back to me saying, we don't have that. That document doesn't exist. And so, there is the 9/11 Commission report, but then there's also these other reports that kind of serve as a buffer to the people that were responsible because they don't have any skin in the game. They don't have signatures. They weren't even done by the people that were engaged in the event. And what gets even crazier, the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms after action report paints an entirely different picture of the FBI, and it gets into just how terrible they were. If you want to really get an idea of what a good after-action report is supposed to look at the ATF 9/11 AAR. That's incredible. So when you look at things like this, and when you start to pick apart other elements of that day, like James Schwartz's interviews talking about how the FBI was coming to him. And James Schwartz, I should say for anybody listening, James Schwartz was the incident commander. He was the chief that was in charge. Well, he's the assistant chief, but he was the chief that was in charge of that day when the firefighting efforts were being made by Arlington. He was talking about how the FBI was coming up to him in 2001 prior. Chris Combs specifically said to him that he was talking about, we're working on these plans, and if there's ever any type of major incident in the DC region, about how the FBI will basically come and take over command responsibilities. I'm kind of summarizing this quickly, but even then, James Schwartz was kind of like, what was he talking about? It didn't make any sense. And then they never really got to talk about it anymore. And the incident took place. And, that's when there's other things we can point to. But the FBI, there was a lot of holes there. And you can approach this from a research standpoint. But back to your original point, the 9/11 Commission report is total garbage. Absolutely.
Garbage. And thank you to Brian and Robin, who both pointed. I can't believe I forgot Muhammad on his name. That's exactly who it was. What I'm going to do now? Yeah, I can't. I'm getting old. I'm going to drop the the link into the stream here, and into the chat room. Okay, and so if you guys, anybody that wants to come on for an either audio or video call, if you want to be on camera and talk to Adam, please do so. The link is there. So
Two things I can get into that we really didn't cover. I forgot to cover one, which is
mhm,
extremely. I'm actually surprised I accidentally skipped over this.
sure.
So prior to going to the Pentagon to start performing our duties on September 11th, my unit was required. My company, people in my company, were required to sign non-disclosure agreements, talking about
Yes, yes, yeah.
yeah, about what we, what if we saw anything,
Yeah,
we
isn't that
wouldn't
something?
talk about it and everything. And so I say to anybody, especially anybody in first response, when was the last time you were on the route to a catastrophic event? And they're like, stop, sign here.
Yeah.
Really,
I see.
really strange. But
Yeah.
what makes it even stranger is that, there are some people in my unit that didn't have to sign that. So, where in the hell did that come from?
Well, do you worry that the fact that obviously you are disclosing things, or do you worry that someone's going to come after you because you violated the terms of your NDA?
Well, I'd have to get that. I wouldn't be too concerned about violating those terms. But I will say this, you kind of talked about the reaction that I got from the truth movement.
Yeah.
The reactions that I've gotten from questioning publicly my lead suspect, that's where I guess you could say the bulk of my danger my fear has come from doxing to actually threatening to come to my house, to threatening my wife. Lee Wheelbarger and I have had a very intense chess match, kind of going back and forth, and I've been
Wow.
recording every single second of it. And
Great.
it goes all the way back to 2021, and he has employed lies, deception, every possible thing under the sun, threats, you name it, intimidation. So nobody has ever acted on that. My wife and I have taken action, with our house and legally. If somebody tries to sue me, they're not going to really get very much. Good luck. I don't own anything on paper, so good luck with that. But
Well,
so
we
it's been a very interesting journey, to say the least. And I
I,
still to this day don't know what's going to happen with these efforts. But people are trying to knock me off my podium here. They're very much trying to sidetrack me.
well, I can imagine. We have a video call here from Brian. Brian, welcome back,
Uh,
brother. How you doing?
Hello.
What do you want to ask Adam?
I was wondering if he could talk about, like, seeing as how he was in the military, what his views were, and then how they changed on like the interventionist policy of our military, like in the war on terror and stuff. Like after looking at 9/11 and see how that happened, and what your views were kind of before, and then like how they changed.
Sure. So I personally believe that we should take a completely different approach to the military. We should be a defense only country. If I was given the reins to this country, it would look differently. I would hand over those military bases to those countries around the world and say, sorry, we have to take a good, long, hard look at our own country and what we've been doing for the last God only knows how many years, in tandem with the atrocities that are happening today. And so my approach has absolutely changed. But I also, when I served, I can just say that I never in a million years thought that our government was capable of the types of things that it did, and that the entity, the cabal, for lack of a better term, that the cabal was as coordinated and has taken such control. I really firmly believe that at our highest levels, we have been subverted. So.
All right. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it. Okay, so anybody else? Anybody wants to come in, jump on in, right in, and ask your questions for Adam? But everybody, I think everybody listening to the show, watching the show, probably agrees that I'm sure we would be called an isolationist at this point. I think we should obey George Washington's advice in his final address, and John Quincy Adams. And America does not go abroad in search of foreign monsters to destroy, which is what we seem to be doing. We'll give you a chance to bring this up later, but James Yonan and a couple other people asked that Do you have a website for the Orion project? Do you have a?
I do, but it's under construction and it's been that way for a while. Just because I want to get everything totally wrapped up, and that's when I'll start to put everything out there. I would say the best place to find my efforts, if you're on X, just go to Orion Project 911, and if you're on Instagram, just go to Awakened Adam. Just like one word, Awakened Adam. Those are going to show you guys the receipts of what I've been working on. Again, though, my work is massive. It's probably going to be a digital project. I'm not doing this for money. I just want to make sure that I'm getting this work out so that it can go very high and very far and wide quickly. Because I don't know how these people are going to respond to the information that I present about them. And again, you guys, these are the highest echelons of our intelligence apparatuses. They are still operating today. My lead suspect was training the people in Ukraine back in 2015 that were getting ready to start really ramping up and fighting the Russians. That's when the CIA and the intelligence people were over there doing that. So he was a part of that. I can prove all that. And he is still helping in the Ukrainian war efforts today from afar. And so the cabal is real. And I don't know what we do to take this entity down. A lot of people say that we're not going to vote our way out of this. I actually am not one of those people. I do think that we just need good Americans that don't have an R or a D next to their name that step up and say, this is exactly what I'm going to do. And I'm not going to steer from it. And I'm not going to take any Israeli money. I'm not going to take any, dirty money. And I'm not going to agree to any wars. There is in 2025 no reason for warfare. We should be directing our resources in so many other ways, but we don't. And it's obvious. I mean, we are being used, and there are people that even go back to saying that World War I, World War II, all these different conflicts need revision because we got drug
It's
into
me.
Yeah, I mean,
Read my books.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And it goes back to one region of the world, and I hate to say it, there is a noticing that is happening, and
Yes, you're exactly right.
What comes from that, who knows?
And it's a good thing because we shouldn't be scared to notice anything. If you notice something, you should be. That's the emperor wearing no clothes. Have to be able to ask these questions. We have White Wolf joining us. White Wolf, what's your question for Adam?
Okay, do you think Pearl Harbor was a surprise attack?
I haven't studied it enough, but I can tell you, I don't think it was. I think we had knowledge that it was going to occur. I've been able to pinpoint on both sides of my family that I had family at that event. So one person died and another person escaped with his life. So knowing that was probably could have been avoided, and that essentially was used to drag us into certain things, really pisses me off.
Yeah. Well, you know where I stand, White Wolf. I've written about it. I definitely believe that Roosevelt practically, he might as well have been flying one of those planes himself. What do you think, White Wolf?
All right. Well, in all of my research, I can take you a little bit deeper, and I can say that the World War II, the Pacific Theater, was engineered by both the Americans and the Japanese in order to steal all the gold of the Pacific Rim. It was secreted in the Philippines, and then it was given to the CIA after the war, the fledgling CIA, in order to do their black ops, in order to pay off the countries that could be paid off, and if not, use the money to groom revolutionary groups that would be favorable to the United States. And we can now, in retrospect, we can see this, all these color revolutions that took place in the 1950s and the 1960s and the 1970s, they were all CIA operations. And that's pretty much been documented at this point. And we know exactly what the CIA is capable of. I don't know if you read Gary Webb's book, Dark Alliance.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, that's a must read. That's one you want to put on your reading list. Because
there's great ones. Compromise by Terry Reid is another good one. There's lots of great books out there that'll take you.
Yeah,
take you down these rabbit holes.
Dark Alliance is very well researched, and very well researched, and it's all and Gary Webb called that all together from the government's own documents.
Yep.
So it's out there.
That's what happens when a journalist does. As Gary Webb said, he'd been winning awards for a long time, and then suddenly his life was threatened, and they ended up killing him. I think he said, because I never wrote about anything that challenged authority really until I did this, and then suddenly, my life's in danger. So I can kind of understand why journalists don't do things. They make a lot of money, and most of them are well paid especially they're working for television or something. So who wants to upset the apple cart like that? I have a great lifestyle here. Why am I going to end up like Gary Webb and people like that? But anything else, White Wolf?
Well, he mentioned that he thinks we can vote our way out of this, and I really don't think so.
I don't think anybody in my audience is going to agree with you, Adam.
I think everything is so rigged at this point. It's just rigged 6 ways from Sunday. There's no way anybody from the outside can get into the club. You have to be Epsteined in order to become a viable politician.
Well, and I hear you, brother. My one concern is just if we can't find a way to solve it, then violence is the only other thing. And it's almost like they want that to occur because then they can usher in more.
Yeah, I don't think violence is the solution. I think the solution is first of all, we have to look to ourselves and we have to build viable households and sustainable households. I think that's the most important thing. What built America was small towns, small communities, church groups, and so on and so forth. That's what
those are great points. White Wolf has a lot of great points, and I have to have you on as a guest again. I don't want to stray too far from the topic, White Wolf, but
right.
I appreciate you, brother. I have you on for a guest soon, okay? And I appreciate you calling in, okay? Let's over in Rockfin. I don't know why. I mean Rumble. I'm sorry, Urban Rumble, and why are you guys in Rumble today? There's not that many of you. Most of you are on YouTube. Fez Woody wants to know one thing that seems impossible is how jets can fly into a steel frame or a concrete building and not have parts coming off. They can't just melt in butter. Absolutely, and that's what we wonder about the World Trade Center. That's what we were wondering about the Pentagon. Something has to happen to those. I mean, maybe in movies they disintegrate like that, but I don't think that would happen in real life.
Let me offer you guys some things. So one of my aspects of my book is the anomalies surrounding the parts, because I was a parts specialist. So I can prove in many different ways that the FBI did not have chain of custody of those parts. And what makes that even more concerning is that those parts were supposed to be kept contained because they were subjected to things that were not good. Jet fuel, allegedly, bodily remains, allegedly, asbestos, all these things. And so I can prove through the research that they didn't have it. And what makes it the most concerning, there's one specific testimony that came from a gentleman that was in my unit, not my company. He was in my unit. It came from this book right here. I'm going to hold it up. It's called Voices of the 9/11 Pentagon Recovery Effort, where basically people were just giving their sides of the story, and they put some of these essays together. But in this, he talked about shortly after everything happened, how him and some other people were using barely operable Isuzu box trucks with paper maps, and they were under the guard of armed guards. They had ammunition, they had weapons, they had all this stuff, but they were transporting these, what they thought were parts, in these trucks to these government facilities. And when they did that, they were given DEA t-shirts to put over their uniform, and they took these parts to DEA facilities. So when you break down the after action reports, you can see that the DEA only served in evidence sifting operations, and it was a voluntary basis. It was very, very, they shouldn't have had that kind of, I guess you could say, responsibilities. So I point to that, why were these guys being given DEA shirts and barely operable Isuzu box trucks? If you try to look for these parts, furthermore, we can't even find out where they were sent to. A lot of the World Trade Center stuff was allegedly sent to China. So I don't know where the Pentagon's parts have been sent to, but as a parts specialist, I can also tell you that every single part on a plane, down to the nuts and the bolts and the small details, they all have serial numbers. And so they do this because when investigations occur, they want to find out the reason why a plane went down. And that might entail a part that malfunctioned. And so I used to tell my people when I worked for Pratt and Whitney, always cross your T's, dot your I's, come to work and do your job to the best of your abilities, because the last thing you want to find out is that you were responsible for something, because they will trace it back to you. So knowing the extent that a governing agency can go to get into the details of a crash too, where are all these parts? Why were the procedures when it came to picking up aeronautical parts post crash? Why were they not followed? If you look at the way that people were picking up plane parts in Shanksville, why was that not the same at the Pentagon? It was totally different. And the only excuse that I've been able to find is, well, time was of the essence. We needed to get those things out of there so we could bring everything in. Well, a plane like a Boeing 757 200 series airplane doesn't just hit a plane or hit a building, evaporate, and then slowly or quickly everything just is all of a sudden gone. So that's one of the other things, you guys. The FBI did not have chain of custody, and that's one specific way that I can prove it. There's a lot of other stories like that. The old guard was kind of used as this very quiet little, technically on the books, but really off the books because they weren't really discussed all that much, kind of element. And the FBI did not have chain of custody. So.
Well, the chain of custody, that's a big problem in the JFK assassination too. I need to probably look more into that in 9/11. Thomas Foney mentions the book Pentagate by Thierry Meyssan. I don't know
Thierry
if
Meyssan.
I'm glad you know how to pronounce it. I think that was the first book that was written about 9/11, I believe. And of course, I think he was from France, maybe he was from another country. And what do you think of his work? Because he was the first person I heard about that drew attention, I think, to a missile hitting the Pentagon, or it couldn't have been a plane. Would you know anything about him?
I do know Theory. I haven't really dug into his work. Never really talked to him. I know he's still kind of loosely involved with some 9/11 truth stuff. But yeah, I would have to say I don't think it was a missile. I just again, the incendiaries that were used. I said Xander Arena. I don't even want to start talking about his work because I won't do it justice. But really, you have to get into also the citizen investigation team, Aldo Marquis and Craig Rinke. And
people asked about that. Do they have a website or anything? Where can people find the citizen investigation team?
NationalSecurityAlert.com. And they have so much. There is tons there, but I would say the very first thing that anybody needs to do is watch that 1 hour and 20-minute video at their website. And they've got all sorts of other supplemental interviews from people. Basically, what they did, few years after the event, they started to go back to DC and they started to interview people. And from the Navy Annex to Arlington Cemetery to outside the Pentagon to actually within the Pentagon grounds, they started to interview people, and these people talked about what was a flyover. And so I don't think it was a missile simply because of what I saw. Missiles, in my humble opinion, not that I'm an expert, they don't do that. But something occurred, and I highly recommend, Xander Arena ultimately is his analysis is key. It was something inside the building. When we break that scene down, Xander and I are also looking into areas where there's testimony of multiple explosions. There's also testimonies of fireballs. The individual that I have been able to stumble upon, my lead suspect, he was the senior technologist for the United States Army. He had Joint Terrorism Task Force access. He was an inventor. He was, outfitting and training our special forces, highest echelons of special forces. He was an explosives expert. He could get his hands on absolutely anything that he wanted. And so what is it? Who knows? Could something have been released from a plane when there was a flyover? Sure. But I think it had to have been something inside. And furthermore, that portion of the collapsed building, like that, when that got pulled away, all that collapsed stuff, everything still pretty much seemed intact. So again, I say, missiles. We've seen a lot what missiles do to buildings. Look at what's happening in Gaza right now. But outside of that collapsed portion, I think if a missile was going to hit the Pentagon, it would have done much, much worse. Outside of that collapsed portion, even if I was like looking down on it from a topographical map, I mean, everything was, the ground even at where that base was of the building. I would say if a missile hit that portion of the building, even the ground would have been dramatically changed, but it wasn't. So, how does a missile do that? I don't think it was a missile. Sure, missiles can be flown from miles away and put into a window, but they also dramatically explode. Xander's, and I would say Xander Arena, you guys, he's put his stuff out there. The International Center for 9/11 Justice, which I'm not in any way, shape.
I have to have Xander on my show too. I mean, he's apparently John Henry over in John Henry 3777 over in Rumble said the 100% the video shows the plane coming out the other side of the building. That would never happen. Fez Woody said, one thing that seems impossible is how jets can fly into a steel frame or a concrete building and not other parts coming off. They can't just melt like butter. And that's the thing I think when we all look at it, I don't know what it was supposed. Of course, we didn't see. And again, they released that video, 15 years after 9/11, or maybe, and it just shows like a fireball. You can't tell what hit. It shows something happening, but they acted like it clearly shows a plane. It did not, and that we were supposed to be satisfied with that. But I don't know how many security cameras you had at 9/11. I found out in American Memory Hole, I found more information about how, just kind of like on, the World Trade Center, a lot of them suspiciously weren't working that day. And as we see in a lot of these major events, but I can't believe that none of them, I mean, this is the Pentagon. Aren't they supposed to have top security? Even in 2001, they had security everywhere. You can't tell me that nothing caught what hit, but I think it's pretty obvious why we can't see what hit it, because it wasn't that plane, whatever it was. And of course, if that happens, what happens to the official story?
That's right. And when the Pentagon film was released, it was done so by Judicial Watch. And, if you look at the outside of the Pentagon, you can actually see as well up on the building video cameras. It's like, where are those? Furthermore, there's pictures that I've been able to gather these from my book. There were video cameras right on the highway, literally looking right at the building. So where were those? The Citgo gas station, you nailed it. That's a big one. That was a primary area where they could have absolutely gotten something, but they didn't. I even back up further. I say, what about Dulles Airport? 300 plus video cameras there. And the one and only thing that they ever gave us, again, they gave it down the line, years down the line, was a video where there's consensus in the 9/11 truth community that there's problems. There's no timestamp. It only shows, it doesn't show all the alleged hijackers going through. There's speed with, speed issues. And then, we know that, even Brenda Brown, the American Airlines ticketing agents that day, said on a very light travel day, I didn't see any Middle Eastern looking men. So we can't even prove that these people were at Dulles that day. And that's where the plane allegedly took off, at 8:20 in the morning. And then it gets hijacked, approximately 30 minutes later. And then this guy that can't even fly a Cessna is doing a massive 1,000+ multi-thousand feet corkscrew maneuver drop, and performing these incidents. When even his own brother, not to jump around, but even Hani Hanjour's own brother, if you dig into Hani Hanjour, there's a lot of ways to dissect him. But his brother even said, my brother didn't do this. There's no way that he could have done this. So they were used.
It's ridiculous. So the whole thing, like I said, and you have Muhammad Atta's father saying he called him the day after. I mean, if that doesn't demand like a 60 Minutes report and a special investigative series, but it was ignored. He had to go to Germany to publicize it. Brian Taylor asks, didn't the feds seize a lot of the video? Well, I'm sure whatever video was there, they seized. They seized the Citgo. Yeah, they seized the Citgo gas station's video. They seized the Doubletree Motel, which is right there in proximity. They seized both of those videos, never been seen. What else do you know about what happened? I think their claim is that the cameras weren't working, which is ridiculous. But whatever video's there, I'm sure they seized probably. Yeah,
and I would even say, too, this is another area where Citizen Investigation Team, they interviewed a Citgo employee. He talks about what he saw. Yes. So I would definitely recommend people dig into that as well.
I think he. I want to. I have it. I think I wrote about it in Hidden History, if not. I think he might have been one of the mysterious deaths because there's a body count in 9/11 too, much like the JFK assassination, some of these other ones, and a lot of these people. I don't know if you've seen. Did you see Tucker Carlson's new 9/11 files, which has been American Free Press actually assigned me to watch it and write a story on it. So that's it's in the current issue. It's it's good for a mainstream thing. Of course, they kind of tend to believe that the hijackers actually did it, but they ask some questions. They talk about Building 7, and they mentioned Barry Jennings, who was one of the most mysterious deaths. He heard explosions in Building 7 and died, very mysteriously. His family disappeared for a while. It was a whole big story. But I'm wondering, did you see Tucker Carlson's 9/11 files?
I didn't. I'm trying to get linked up to him. I would love to get on there and tell my story, even if I'm not done with the book yet. But no, I haven't. I do hear though that Tucker's going in on Israel pretty hard. I haven't had the chance to listen to him lately, but I hear
Well, he is, and I think that's what I think. I don't know what's happening because these are things that you couldn't talk about for a long time, and there's with the Charlie Kirk assassination that has brought this up. There's so much attention suddenly being made to Israel and Jewish power in the United States that you couldn't talk about for a long time. People like Candace Owens and Jason Whitlock, who's a great podcaster, these people openly talk about it. And you couldn't for a long time. Now you have Tucker Carlson, he's not on Fox News anymore. Probably, I don't think he could do it if he was on Fox News. I doubt it. But these things are being Megyn Kelly and people like that are kind of banding it about. They're mentioning it. And again, I don't know. I think this was an inside job within our own government, but Israel is intricately interwoven with
well,
us.
I'll tell you something, you guys, that I have not shared with the public yet. It's so hot off the press. It's just I haven't had the chance to. So my lead suspect has it, and if you go to his Twitter account, Twitter X, he's very, very opinionated on Israel. He's absolutely a Zionist, 100%.
Interesting.
But when I was not surprised, I guess you could say, when I found that he started to interview somebody in the last couple weeks, the head of the Libertarian Caucus inside the Likud party, guy by the name of Amir Whiteman. Lee Wheelbarger interviewed this guy within the last couple of weeks. And this is not the first time he's interviewed him. He did another one recently in the last couple of weeks. But, big fan of this guy is Lee. And this guy went on Russian media, Amir did, and basically told Russia what's coming once they finish the war, that they're coming for Russia next, and that the Jewish people are not going to forget what basically Russians have been doing to slaughter Ukrainians, their brothers. So I say, if you also believe that Israel had its hands in 9/11, and I 1000% do, there would have to be some type of an Israeli element there that touches my suspects, and that does too. I can prove this. So
How do you spell? It's Lee Will. How do you spell his last name?
Wheelbarger.
Okay, so almost like wheelbarrow. Okay, wheelbarrow. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And I've been able to trace a lot of people that go all the way back in his family to, the early 20th century in the military-industrial complex, and still to this day, his niece. I think it's his niece. It's one of his family members. I haven't been able to form an absolutely definitive place in the tree where she is, but they are family. She sits on the. It's a Reagan institution, the Institution of Peace, the Reagan Institution of Peace. She's one of their board members. And this woman was basically about to be given, under the first Trump administration, this really high-ranking intelligence position where she was going to have tons of responsibility. And all of a sudden, at the 0 hour, Trump nixed her and said, "I question your loyalty." And he put somebody else in charge that day. But so I say, what's that all about? So, they basically, they're very close ties. They're familial. And these people just bounce back and forth between the private and the government sectors. And who really gets elected has no say. When Trump basically pushed Catherine Wheelbarger, Lee's, familial tie to the side, Biden eventually came up, and then he gave her express confirmation into the Reagan Institution of Peace. And so I'm saying to myself, why is somebody that's a Democrat now given this express confirmation to this woman that is like big time, neocon? She worked for all these people, Cheney. She worked for Michael Chertoff directly.
Oh yeah, sure.
So it's like, okay, so now we've got the Chertoff ties. If you're following the geopolitical angles,
And explain again how you first came into contact with Wheelbarger, because he pretends to be part of the 9/11 Truth Movement, or how did you get in contact with him?
So I was doing a talk just like this. One of my Instagram followers said, "Hey, there's a guy, his name is Jason Shurka. This was back in 2021 when COVID truth and all these things were really starting to come out." She said, "You should go talk to him." Well, I sent him everything and he said, "Yeah, sure, come on." And we did a collaboration. And much like people are asking me questions here, in the comments section of that collaboration, people kept saying this man's name. And so, full disclosure, this is another thing I've only said a little bit. Jason Shurka has a lot of Israeli ties. And so I stumbled upon him. There was, that was fate. That was somebody saying, "Hey, go there and go tell your story here." Kind of like Xander did. "Hey, you should talk to Don. Don would probably love to have you." Same thing. And so I personally believe Jason's, I guess you could say, his ties to Israel, they're really questionable. And he is now running his own TV network. And so, I was very surprised after our collaboration when I saw when Tucker Carlson left his job, Jason Shurka offered Tucker Carlson a $150 million contract. I was like, whoa. So who are you really? And we had a collaboration. But so I believe personally that Jason's, and my book's going to show why to all of this, but Jason's purpose was to kind of bring me up to this public spot and then to basically have Lee Wheelbarger come up and to spike me into the ground. And so I approached him in the comments section and in every private message that I possibly could with nothing but respect. And I just said, "Hey, Mr. Wheelbarger, I was there that day. I would love to speak with you. It would be fantastic to get your opinion." And he at first I thought he was going to be kind. I thought, we might just have different opinions, and that's that. He said he wanted to have me on. He said, "Shoot me your info and we'll have you on the show and we can talk." He never did that, but at the same time, because you guys might remember, he was also a paid news source. He was hosting a public broadcast that day. And right then and there, when I was basically responding to people that kept saying down in the chat section, "Hey, get with Lee Wheelbarger," people were taking what I was saying to them and telling him in the middle of this news broadcast that he was putting on. And, then he started to go off and say things that were crazy. So I was kind of scratching my head. I was like, so over here publicly, you said, that you would totally be fine having me on and you wanted to talk. And now on your news broadcast, you're discrediting me, saying everything, saying I wasn't there. We've never even met. And you're saying all sorts of crazy things. So that initial kind of response that I received from him is what really drew me even closer. Like if he would have just played the game, kept his mouth shut and respected my opinion, oh yeah, we probably would have went separate ways. But the manner in which he responded told me everything. And that's when I started to dig into him. And that's when I started to find his team. And lo and behold, then other things. So
is Jason Shurka, is he associated with Tucker Carlson? You said does he work with him or for him or whatever?
So Jason does his own thing. I haven't talked to Jason in a number of years. He absolutely knows I don't trust him whatsoever. But he runs what's known as Unified TV. You can find him on social media pretty much anywhere, but he focuses on a lot of different topics, a lot of, truther stuff, from COVID to aliens to everything that's kind of being questioned nowadays. But yeah, I say, I really think that his purpose in all this was just to host me and then to kind of hand me off to Lee, and then for Lee to kind of make me look stupid, scare the shit out of me, a number of things. God only knows what their intentions were. But the reason I think that Jason ultimately did that is because I told Jason low key what was happening. And I said, hey, I'm investigating this guy. I've stumbled into things. I would love to continue, because he asked me, you want me to link you up with some more people? And I was like, no, I want to dig into this guy. And 2024 rolled around. And when I started to kind of circle back to Jason, he basically ghosted me. He, deleted our collaboration altogether. So that comment section, the collaboration where he praised my efforts and all this stuff disappeared. And I basically sent him a text message. I was just like, I don't understand you, dude. I thought I could count on you. And he immediately reached out to me. And I could just tell that something wasn't right with him. He gave me some bullshit response. And basically now his motive, or he's now doing the see no evil thing. And that's been the way it's been for a couple of years. And I'm just going to put everything I possibly can about him in my book and say, I hate to say it, dude, you've got some Israeli ties. You yourself are Jewish. With that, I'm not going to sit there and cast you into the pit of hell for that. But it's like, right now, like we said, there's a noticing going on. So are you part of those efforts? There is a war that's going on right now, and it seems to be the battle for perception. And I believe that we're facing an enemy that's trying to physically overrun us, but where they're trying to overrun us the most is between these ears, and they're trying to basically gain they're trying to control the perception of everything. And, that's going to be really hard right now, because it seems like we've got all these psyops that aren't given the chance to really mature. And there's so much that's being pushed and pushed and pushed as we just go into this terrible surveillance state. And I really do believe, there's a lot of things that we can look at, but in the last 25 years, 9/11, that was the key element that started to really push us to where we are now.
How about have you ever read or gone to the Let's Roll forums?
I've seen some of those forums. I haven't really
Yeah.
gotten involved with them.
They're pretty extreme, but I got some good things there, because they are extreme, and I like extremes. But they also comes with problems, because again, they're one of the ones that they have thread after thread attacking Willie Rodriguez for some unknown reason. I don't know why. So, but that's what happens. So you've obviously got a good taste for this, how this happens, where people just attack each other. And I don't quite understand it. People in here, of course, are talking about Tucker Carlson. And I know Tucker Carlson's what he is, but he's the closest thing in mainstream where at least he's talking about 9/11 now. And he's mentioning Building 7. Yeah, he's not telling you anywhere near the whole truth, but I don't know why he's doing it. Do you want, because you talk about these guys that you're talking about, the guy you've been dealing with, and Wheelbarger and people like that. You got to wonder why do they do what they do? Why do they're pretending he's casting himself as someone who doubts the official 9/11 story, correct?
This is Wheelbarger?
Yeah.
No, he says everything that the government said happened.
Okay. He does.
1000%.
But and again, how did you? He heard you talking, and then he just came up and started disagreeing with you, or how did you come together if he didn't agree with any of this?
Oh, so he was in the middle of giving his news broadcast. And so I was typing to his followers in the Jason Churka collaboration that were commenting in the comments section.
This is it. Yeah, okay.
And then while I was typing that, these people were feeding him that information, and he was in the middle of not a collaboration, but a news broadcast talking about the day's news. And then he just went off and threw all that aside, went off into left field and started calling me everything but my name, and throwing everything but the kitchen sink at me, metaphorically speaking. And so that is really where it all started. And it just didn't make any sense. And then 2021 was big. He did a 20th anniversary documentary where he really shot himself and completely put himself and finished himself. I was challenging him a lot in 2021, and to put that to rest, he basically did an 8-hour documentary on the 20th anniversary, and in that he explained everything that happened that day, and he, most importantly, in that 8 hours, he discussed his timeline. And so how he arrived at the Pentagon, where he was, leading up to that event, and the other details about what he did in 2001, even further screwed himself. It just gets to a point where the lies have been more and more and more and more desperate. And Napoleon, I think it was Napoleon, said, if your enemy's making mistakes, just keep letting them make mistakes. And so
What do you think he was there?
oh, I know he was there. I have pictures to show he was
Okay,
there.
okay. So he was there.
He alleges that he
Hmm.
showed up and took part in the first response effort, and that basically he was there for 10 days, and then when he was no longer needed, he left. I say differently. I say that he was not only part of what caused the incendiaries, but he was also part of, and I've got video to prove this, he was part of taking what caused those incendiaries out of there and covering it up. And my book's going to show all the details of that too. Again, I've got, as we speak right now, over 1,600 pages. And it's funny, Americans, don't worry. There's pictures in those. I'm not going to put you guys into this big, huge stack of papers, but there's hundreds of pictures built into that. And ultimately what I show is just from that first interaction to the 20th anniversary where he shot himself in the foot, and he gave his timeline, and it's impossible. And then the ways that I've been challenging him since then, over and over and over again, and the responses I've been getting, and those responses, they've become more and more and more desperate. And finally, in 2024, it got so bad that I had him painted in such a bad corner. He used to have a 50,000 plus, I think it was about 55,000 people following his YouTube channel that he was primarily operating on. And when I first started to give talks showing people my storyboard, how I stumbled into him and all these things, that's when he chopped his page completely down. He basically said that YouTube was about to ban him. And I was like, I told my teammates, I was like, hey guys, he's putting up that, this was a few days after I gave my speech about how I stumbled into him and showed all the evidence. And all of a sudden his page is getting chopped down. And if you go to his page is no longer there. He's got other pages he uses now, but that primary page of his that he had been operating since 2008, I believe, all the way up to 2024, had millions of views, 55,000 people. He chopped that down because of me, because that had all the evidence, a lot of it at least, that I had used up until that point. And so he had to, vanish it. I've got it all saved, of course, and so do my teammates, and I've got proof of him deleting all this stuff. I've got it all. But just the desperate lengths that he has gone to try to recover from the things that I've got him saying and doing is wild.
Yeah, it's definitely a wild story, and it's very, it's a cautionary tale again about, I guess, why some people don't come forward. I'd love to be able to have April Gallup on the show, and she was one of many people that was very vocal early on, but you can't get a hold of her now. And I don't know why would you stop talking at this point? So maybe she was scared, her family was threatened. Who knows? I mean, they do kill people. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I have reason to believe, and I haven't been able to confirm this with her, but people that have talked to me, that have talked to her, said that she was spooked. That she encountered the same types of things that I did, and it kind of put her off. Now I'm a stubborn infantryman, so if you push me, I'm most likely going to push you right back. I'm not going to just come at you crazy, but I don't know what to tell you. And I say this. People ask me, what's driving all this? Because obviously there is an element of danger. And, I could say that I'm stubborn and I want to get answers, but really it goes back to, my life of watching my father. My father was a Vietnam veteran, and he was in country in 1968. And this is another conflict that people say needs revision. But I watched the way that this man struggled for the majority of my life. And I say, no matter what you do, if you serve in the military, it's going to change you. But then, knowing that these conflicts that we get involved in are oftentimes a byproduct of a false flag event, and that these people that do these things couldn't care less about people like my father and the types of costs that they pay for the rest of their life, and the post-traumatic stress, the ringing, the tinnitus in that man's ear, he almost took his life for that. So I say, the American service members and the sailors and everybody that join up, they just want to do what's right, and they want to serve their country. And then they get thrown into these types of instances. And so that drives me more than anything, is just getting to the bottom of this and proving that, this terrible institution that has historically been horrible throughout the world is also doing horrible things to Americans and by Americans. And, we can look to so many things right now and we can pinpoint that. But here we are still in 2025. Don and Adam are talking about what the hell's going on and why nothing seems to be happening about it. So who knows?
Have you, did the military, excuse me, did the military directly try to retaliate against you? Anything for your speaking out?
Not that I know of. No.
So,
I
assume you're getting, maybe you're getting a pension. I don't know how long you were in the military or not.
Actually, I want to take that back. Something did happen. I think it was 2021, somewhere, or 2022, one of the two. It's part of my presentation, but I had a Veterans Administration hearing, and it was to determine basically my disability rating. And so this has been going on for years. It's finalized now, but at that point in time, I was already absolutely on my way when it came to 9/11 truth. I had stumbled onto my people, the lead suspects that I'd stumbled upon. I was totally engaged in watching these people. And so at this Veterans Administration hearing, I was sitting with this judge and I was sitting with this DAV rep, Disabled American Veterans. And, they said to me, do you have anything else you'd like to add to this? And I said, ma'am, yes, I do. I said, I have a responsibility to tell you because I was at this event and I took part in cleaning it up, and my life has now changed and I'm really investigating it. And I told this Veterans Administration judge, I said, I don't believe a Boeing 757-200 series airplane hit the building on September 11th. And I said, and furthermore, since I stumbled into it, since I started investigating the event, I stumbled into people that are dangerous, and I think they're responsible. And lo and behold, this woman didn't say anything. I thought, surely this VA judge is going to have to say something. The DAV rep kind of looked at me like, wow, did you just say that? And then a couple weeks later, and my book's going to show this, I received a letter from the Veterans Administration indicating that my hearing could not be accurately recorded, and there was a malfunction with the recording device, and that basically I would have to go through the entire hearing all over again, and that pushed me back 11 months. So yeah, there's a lot of very strange ways and a lot of things. We've been talking for almost 2 hours now, and we haven't even covered everything. So I've been at this for 5 years, you guys, and I'm not going to put this shit down until I get to the bottom of it. I can assure you.
Well, you're a profile in courage. I admire whistleblowers like you, and that's what you are. And whistleblowers are never welcomed in this country. But yeah, we're just about out of time, so I want you to close with anything else anything we missed that you want to say, and then give out any links, because I know people are interested in you, and any links that you want to share.
No, you guys, just again, my X account, Orion Project 911, and my Instagram, Awakened Adam. I'm not really involved at Instagram as much, so go to my X. Just stay tuned. I'm working as hard as I can, and I can't also stress to you enough, Citizen Investigation Team and, Xander Arena. Absolutely necessary resources at every.
And their website again is, what was the website again for them?
So it's National Security Alert. You can do that, or just citizeninvestigationteam.com. And then Xander Arena's work has been published by the International Center for 9/11 Justice. I know he's probably going to be working on some additional publishing opportunities once his work continues to evolve. He's very busy. He's also he's the world's foremost expert on basically what happened with the Las Vegas mass shooting as well. He's been engaged in a lot of that. So I would definitely have him on.
Yeah, that sounds good. I know a lot of my listeners are interested in that too. Well, I'm sure glad that I met him outside the Turning the Tide. We're waiting for Ubers together, and we just got to talking, and he mentioned you, and I said, "Wow, okay, that sounds great." So certainly glad that we had you on. I appreciate you coming, Adam.
Thanks,
Eisenberg. Don. Check him out and keep us updated on your work. And everybody else, thanks so much for listening to I Protest, and we'll talk to you next week, same time.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.